Good morning. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Wanted to go over some of the things I think we'll begin discussing this week. On the floor, I suspect we'll have another crack at zero-based budgeting. I know that Senator Schaefer has been moving quickly on bringing that bill up to the floor. As you recall, that was the first piece of legislation we handled this year when we pushed through a veto override of the zero-based budgeting bill that was vetoed last year. We're going to see a new version of that has made its way out of committee and should be on the floor this week. A bill dealing with extracurricular activities for public charter school children, I suspect will be on the floor this week as well. Not much controversy there, but certainly a good piece of legislation as we dramatically expand charter school legislation and charter schools throughout this state. We need to make sure that those students that participate in those schools also have the chance to take part in the extracurricular activities that they certainly have a right to do so. I've got a couple of issues I'd like to bring up today with some senators that have joined me. First, I want to start with the public-private partnerships for infrastructure. Now, this extends beyond just reservoirs, but Governor Deal has made it very clear that he intends to tackle this water problem, certainly coming from an area of the state where this is a major issue. In Gainesville, he understands the need to expand our ability to capture the water that falls in Georgia. And one of those things, of course, is building a stronger and more vibrant reservoir system. With that in mind, I would like to invite State Senator Ross Tollison to come join us, and he has introduced legislation dealing with public-private partnerships, which I think will greatly help the state in getting the dollars necessary into those projects.
Thank you, Senator. And I asked the senator if he would. We'd had a press conference at 5:45 this morning. He said he didn't think he'd be able to get y'all here. I don't understand that. Anyway, I introduced this bill last Thursday afternoon, I believe it was, and this is just another step in helping the governments around the state, the local governments, as we go forward. When we pass the statewide water plan, all the planning processes are still going on with that. That's working very well. Last year we had Senate Bill 370, which laid out a lot of conservation measures inside of that. Over the next 25 years, this state's going to invest a lot of money in water infrastructure, not just reservoirs. This gets kind of written up as a reservoir bill, but that's just one facet of it. But also we'll be dealing with the infrastructure around the state and people being able to have public-private partnerships for that, whether it's a wastewater treatment plant or after these communities do all their leak detection over the next few years, then they'll have to go back and fix some of the infrastructure where they have leaks. So this will be able to be used as public-private partnership for any of those type water projects. And if you look out over the next 25 years, a lot of money is going to be invested in Georgia's water facilities, infrastructure, reservoirs, everything. And I don't think this just gives another opportunity for local governments that are totally in control of this process. We've left all the decision-making up to local governments. It just gives them another tool to use of financing for any project they want to use as far as the water facilities they have go. So I think we focused to make sure that it's a clean bill. It's a clean bill, like I say, that gives local governments total control over this process. We even laid out in there this has no bearing on eminent domain. All that stays in the hands of the local government. So with that, it's just another tool to help with financing for local governments, and I'll be glad to take any questions if you have them.
What do you think? This, of course, last year's bill got through the Senate but not the House. What is it about this bill that's different from last year that may give it a better chance to get through both chambers?
Well, this is a clean, local control government bill. The bill last year was not that clean. I even helped strip down the bill last year to get it down to something that I felt that would be palatable around the building. But I think we went back this year, and I kind of worked with ACCG, GMA, all the different local government groups, and tried to get a bill that we felt like would be a help to them. and make sure that we left all the power in their hands. Even when we have mentioned here about GFA, GFA can go to a local government and say, here's a project we think it'd be good. Well, that's fine, but the local government has the final authority on whether to, go forward with the project or not.
Senator, if you ask Atlanta about, when you're talking about water supply, it's one of those really vital things. If you ask Atlanta about its experience with United Water some years ago, it was so messy that they had to go back to public supply and public repair, and they're doing it all themselves. What is there in this proposal that would keep things like that from happening?
Well, the local governments are in control of this, and they actually own the projects. This is really just a financing tool. So this is local control, local government ownership, but it is a financing tool for them, and that's the big difference in that. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Another issue that was introduced last week, I'd like to bring Senator John Albers to the podium. This is hopefully what we ultimately hope will result in the tearing down of the Georgia 400 toll. As I drove through there 15 minutes ago, I thought how nice it would be for this structure no longer to be here, as we promised the voters that it wouldn't be after those bonds were paid off. So to speak to that, Senator John Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Good morning. Last week I dropped Senate Bill 97, and that is to change the process by which the State Road and Tollway Authority will govern the Georgia 400 toll moving forward. The Georgia 400 toll, as we're all very well aware of, was promised to the voters to be torn down. Sadly, last year, the State Road and Tollway Authority extended that for 10 years and has since taken out bonds against future toll revenues. This new bill will change the process that they can take out no more debt against that toll with not just having CERTA, but also the General Assembly to approve those projects. While we know we can't take it down immediately now because they've taken out a significant amount of bond money, we do believe we can take that 10-year time frame down considerably. And when that's done, we'll do what we should have done, which is tear down that toll. This is a matter of public trust, and public trust is paramount, much more so than a toll road or funds for future projects. If we believe that tolls are the answer, which I do believe that tolls can provide a myriad of transportation options for us moving forward, then we should be very transparent with that process, bring it in front of voters, and make sure that new roads will have tolls on them, and they'll have the proper framework and governance around each one of those. With that in mind, it's time to do what's right by the taxpayers, and again, this is about public trust, and it's time to tear down that toll. And I'll take any questions.
You said take the 10-year bond down significantly. What's significantly? 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 9 months?
Right. Good question, Jim. We're not exactly sure how much toll revenue will come in, but my best guess would be maybe 3 years before we can pay off the approximate $60 million in bonds that have been taken out for the 85-400 interchange.
So 3 years
From today. But these are all guesstimates at this point. Any other questions?
Are you saying that you think that tolls should be part of the overall transportation plan for the state, and that the end will actually probably see more of them?
Well, I think if we look at building a new road, the best way to do that is to use a toll road, because then the people who drive on that pay for it, and we don't have to make a tax increase for our current voters. So that's a great example of how it could be used. But in this case, that road's been paid for many times over. Thank you.
All right, and the only other issue that I have this morning is obviously we'll probably see some version of a Hope Scholarship reform measure this week, and not on the floor, not even in committee, but certainly there'll be a, we expect that we'll see something this week, and that will begin a very healthy discussion of what needs to be done to preserve one of the state's most popular programs. So with that, I'll take any more questions.
Chip, on zero-based budgeting, the House, I hope that's not me, is it?
That's Georgia Natural Gas.
The House has its own zero-based budgeting bill, and they have tacked on a provision that would take the legislature back to a single legislative budget office. Can you see the Senate going along with that?
Absolutely not. The Senate Budget Office has saved the taxpayers an enormous amount of money. I think it's very healthy when you have the House Budget Office do their work and then the Senate Budget Office do their work to make sure that everywhere we can find savings, we find it. The House Budget Office does a fantastic job, there's no doubt about it, but so does the Senate Budget Office, and it's worth its weight in gold. I mean, we have saved enormous amounts of money by having those two budget offices, because really the process is at this point, finding savings.
Chip, speaking of budgets, will the Senate be voting on the mid-year budget this week, do you think?
That is our intent, to vote on the mid-year budget this week. And
Wednesday, Thursday?
Probably Thursday, but I can't say for certain. And I want to thank the House. They have really worked hard. The new budget leadership in the House and the Speaker and the Majority Leader have really worked hard to get us the budget, the amended budget quickly, and we understand that the big budget is moving rather fast as well, and we thank them for doing that. It is very difficult when that is laid on our lap at the very end of the session, along with almost all the tax policy that usually comes along with it. And this year they've done a great job in moving it forward, and we've been working very well with them.
Senate Resolution 20, that'll be up this week in the Senate?
Not sure yet. It is a constitutional amendment. I frankly got to spend some time working with all the senators and make sure that everyone's on board. It's a measure, or a similar measure, has passed twice with very similar language, so I don't think there'll be a problem, but we want to go back and refresh the memory of everyone as to what this legislation does. And
Is it fair to call it a tax cap bill in terms of what the legislation does?
I think it'd be fair to call it a spending cap bill. And so, as you know, it'll limit us to inflation plus population, which historically that's been in the 5 to 6% range. That has not been an issue the last few years because we haven't reached that. But if we go above that, or if revenue comes in above that, then we need to make sure that that is put into the reserve fund, and then at some point either pays off debt or goes back to the taxpayers. It's just a proper budgeting technique. It's really the way that most businesses budget, and the states that have tried to budget that way have done a very good job with it, and it's about time that Georgia does it as well. But of course, this is a constitutional amendment that allows the voters to determine for themselves, and we think if the voters have the chance, they will say to us how much is too much to spend.
On hope, the governor has hinted that he's looking at the idea of decoupling the tuition increases from the Hope grant, or Hope scholarships for the public college students. The private colleges want to go even farther, not only decouple, but have a little tiered system where you get the same amount no matter where you go, and then they just break it out by different types of formats for schools, I guess you could say. Number one, would the Senate go along with decoupling? And number two, would you go even farther? Do you like the private college proposal where all four-year college kids would get the same amount?
I think anyone that looks at the Hope problem recognizes that it's very difficult to solve the problem in the long term without some form of decoupling. We need to reevaluate on a yearly basis the amount of revenue generated by the lottery and how much we can spend for Hope scholarships in pre-K. So without decoupling, I don't see how you solve this problem. So I think most people agree that that needs to be part of the picture. The second part, I think, is a little bit more problematic because then you get in judging the values of certain colleges against other colleges, and what is the measure for doing that? What is the criteria? And I think that can be problematic. So I'm not sure if that's going to be part of the final answer or not. I know it's been discussed. We know on the public side what the research universities are. We clearly know what the four-year universities are. But when you get on the private side, it gets a little more murky, and it's hard to determine the value of one college against another. Would you consider Mercer a research university type school? Would you consider Emory a research university type school? And I think those are the questions that would be asked, and there'd be a lot of debate on that.
Their argument is that the kids should be able to choose where they want to be, and
Amen to
give them all
that
the
principle.
give them all the same grant for the same type of school.
Yeah, I certainly understand that, and we absolutely must maintain both a healthy public and private system for Hope Scholarship. I think some people forget that when a student goes to a public university, the state of Georgia taxpayers spend another $6,000 or more supporting that student, and that's wonderful. I went to 2 public universities myself, got a great education, I hope, and we want to support our public universities. But when a student chooses a private university in Georgia and they receive the Hope Scholarship, that's all they receive. There are no other public monies outside of the TEG grants that would go to that student. So from a taxpayer standpoint, it's very beneficial when students choose some of our fine private universities in Georgia, and we certainly do not want to discourage that.
Do you think that the decoupling of this HOPE program would give the regents an incentive to try to kind of hold the line on tuition?
I certainly hope so. Initially, you know, if you set the new HOPE amount very close to where it is today, you won't really have those market forces if the difference is 5 or 10%. But as time moves along and the difference between what the HOPE pays and the actual tuition increases, I think the market forces will dictate that those schools do their very best to hold down costs. Now, if you look across the Southeast, they've done a fairly good job holding down cost when you compare it to the rest of the states around us. I think the real problem is that the tuition increases have come at a very rapid rate over the last few years. I think if you go back 10 years, we were the bottom among the Southeast schools. Now we're no longer the bottom because there have been some considerable increases. But we're still, regardless of how you look at it, even if you're paying out of pocket, it's still a great bargain to go to one of our public universities, no question.
Has there been some talk of reviving or maybe funding, I think it was Mr. Hill's bill a few years ago, of doing 1% student loans to help where the shortfall is?
There has been a lot of discussion on how we create a workable loan program for students. And I think we look at it from two perspectives. Number one of the suggestions has been, should there be a loan for the first year for all students, much like the homeschool students have to do right now? I think that's a great idea. It may be difficult to put that in place overnight because that incorporates a lot of students and a lot of loans. A second, probably more workable solution at this point in time is a loan to take care of the difference, whether it be just for that difference between tuition and the HOPE scholarship, or the difference between total cost of going to school, books and fees and things like that, and the HOPE scholarship. So I think you'll probably see something along those lines of some sort of loan program, very low interest, 1% or 0%. And with that, you can do a lot of things. I mean, you can encourage students who make above a 3.0, you can encourage them by having their loans be at 0 interest percent. And if you get a 1.5, maybe we charge you a little bit more interest. So there's a lot of things you can do with those type of loans, but I think that'll be part of the solution. Got time for one more?
I know Sunday sales is so last week, but
It's so last week, I don't know what you're talking about.
some of the criticism that's come back in light of what happened has not been so much about, you know, is Sunday sales good or not, but about the process, about the feeling that for all the talk of transparency, a lot of key decisions are now made behind closed doors by a small group of senators. I wanted to get your response to that.
Yeah, first of all, let me state abundantly clear, and hopefully everybody that has been emailing me hears this loud and clear. I'm the first co-sponsor of the bill and fully support its passage. That being said, I have one vote. But the process question I find a little strange, not by those outside the system who don't follow what we do, but by those inside the system, only because there's always been a process for determining what bills get to the floor. I think everyone clearly recognizes that with hundreds and hundreds of bills being introduced, not every bill gets to the floor, not every bill is going to have a vote. So there has to be a process for determining which bills actually get to the floor for a debate and a vote. We've been very clear about that process, and that is that if some point as a bill moves forward, that we determine that there's simply not the votes for it, there's really no use wasting more time on it because we've got a lot of other big issues that do need to get to the floor for a vote. So, you know, this process, I think, is probably the best process we've had, and that is that we determine whether the votes are there, and if the votes aren't there, we move forward with something else. If the votes are there, we would move it to the floor. As of right now, the votes simply aren't there, so we can continue to talk and debate it, but I know from a legislator standpoint, we'd surely like to move on to some other issues, and, you know, HOPE scholarship, balance the budget, creating jobs, I mean, these are chief among them. So I understand the concern out there, but there has to be a process in place for determining which bills move to the floor. We can't have every bill that's introduced on the Senate floor. There's just simply not enough time. Thank you, guys.